The film does something that is very sinister and insidious. And I say that because they have done two things. One, they have presented Karsandas Mulje saying that, okay, what they are fighting against, or the sexual promiscuities in the Sampradaya of the Vallabha tradition that they're fighting against, has been going on for centuries. Now, this statement that this has been going on for centuries, that this is something Karsandas is saying about 100 to 150 years ago. And when he says centuries, then he's actually implying that this is going on for, like, Sampradaya has been like 500 years. So what he's saying that it was part of the Sampradaya as soon as it began. The way they have presented Karsandas Mulji, they have presented him as a very devout Vaishnava. In fact, in the trial, he says that, oh, I bow my head on the Haveli every time I go there. And so they have shown him as this devout Hindu, devout Vaishnava who's fighting against the evils of the tradition. Now, in reality, what we find is Karsandas Mulji was neither of those things. And the case actually went from a trial against one person to the trial against a sampradaya to the trial against Krishna devotional traditions itself. In fact, the missionary people that were present in the during the trial and the judges, they all made a statement that Krishna himself is a promiscuous god, and he cannot be an ideal for bhakti, because if a god himself is going around wandering with women, and that is something that has been celebrated by Krishna devotional traditions, then how would the tradition itself be? So you see where this is going, and Karsandas never defended. So when all these three things come together, that's based on an obscure book, they are turning Karsandas into a devout Vaishnava, and that they're showing this has been going on to centuries, this becomes another insidious attack on Hindu dharma without well research.
Namaste and welcome to another episode of Indic Talks organized by Center for Indic Studies. Today we will be discussing the Netflix film Maharaj, which has been brought under direct scrutiny by Prakriti Manoj Goswami ji in order to portray the ill-researched facts, exaggerated misrepresentations, and historical inconsistencies the film carries under the garb of a noble fight against a draconian Hindu high priest. In conversation with me, she will explore the background of the case, the journalist Karsandas Mulje, and the Maharaj and the Vallabhacharya Sampradaya. Prakriti Goswami ji belongs to the direct lineage of the Vallabhacharya Sampradaya and wards off the targeted attack on her family and traditions with an exceptional inventory of arguments. She is a student of religious studies who holds an MPhil in religious studies from the University of Cambridge, UK, and is a doctoral candidate at Indiana University, Bloomington, US. She is currently teaching the Vallabh Vedant Diploma course at Mumbai University. I welcome you, ma'am, and I request you to give our audience an overview of what they can expect today.
Thank you so much, Ojasvi. It's a pleasure to be here. We can go into the details of the case, and we might, but I would also directly focus on the film at this stage, because I want to exactly when we did this talk before, the film wasn't released. And now the film has released, so we have more of the material and we can exactly note where the film goes awry. So if you look at the film does something that is very sinister and insidious. And I say that because they have done two things. One, they have presented Karsandas Mulje saying that, okay, what they are fighting against, or the sexual promiscuities in the Sampradaya of the Vallabha tradition that they're fighting against, has been going on for centuries. Now, this statement that this has been going on for centuries, that this is something Karsandas is saying about 100 to 150 years ago. And when he says centuries, then he's actually implying that this is going on for, like, Sampradaya has been like 500 years. So what he's saying that it was part of the Sampradaya as soon as it began. So one, we have no proof to say that, and this is highly distorted version of some of the basic principles of Sampradaya that I will discuss today. So that is one problem, that the way they present that this has traditionally been the part of the Sampradaya without any grounds. So that's one problem. The problem number two is the way they have presented Karsandas Mulje. They have presented him as a very devout Vaishnava. In fact, in the trial, he says that, oh, I bow my head on the Haveli every time I go there. And so they have shown him as this devout Hindu, devout Vaishnava who's fighting against the evils of the tradition. Now, in reality, what we find is Karsandas Mulji was neither of those things. And the case actually went from a trial against one person to the trial against a sampradaya to the trial against Krishna devotional traditions itself. So, because and in fact, the missionary people that were present in the during the trial and the judges, they all made a statement that Krishna himself is a promiscuous god, and he cannot be an ideal for bhakti, because if a god himself is going around wandering with women, and that is something that has been celebrated by Krishna devotional traditions, then how would the tradition itself be? So you see where this is going. And Karsandas never defended that position. He was of that position because even the traditions that came out of this, the Arya Samaj and the part that he was of the Brahmo Samaj, they all had a very non-dualistic idea of God. So any theistic conception of God was something that they believed to be primitive, not very modern, not very rational. So that's one problem. So this is when they show Karsandas as a devout Vaishnava, that kind of miscommunicates the whole story, that you have a Vaishnava fighting against the tradition when that is nothing of the case. Then what we have is wherever the film goes off track from the trial, that this is not something shown in the trial, they say it is based off the book. Now, the book itself lacks any authenticity. It's not written by a lawyer, it's not written by any religious studies student. It's not well researched. It's not even well known. We were unaware of this book unless the film was made on it. So they chose an obscure, I don't know with what intention that book was written, that book, and they are basing their whole scenes of sexual promiscuities on that book. So they have that book to fall upon. Whenever the film goes off trial and they don't have proofs to show what they're showing, they're like, oh, it's based on the book. So when all these three things come together, that's based on an obscure book, they are turning Karsandas into a devout Vaishnava, and that they're showing this has been going on to centuries, this becomes another insidious attack on Hindu dharma without well research. So that's exactly a problem. And now I'd probably leave up to you. So which direction do you want to take this conversation to?
Well, ma'am, firstly, I want to take it into the direction of the timeline. The libel case happened in 1962. We had just gotten over the Sepoy mutiny, as the Britishers would call it. So, how exactly that had an impact on the judiciary scene back then in India, especially in Gujarat, and how exactly did it see its impact on this particular libel case?
Yes, so that's the most important part of this case, actually, because if you see that after the Sepoy Mutiny, British realized something very important, that if you mess with religion in India, it could almost topple the government. Like that happened even with the Mughal rule once when they introduced the beef talents in the dietary restrictions of Hindus at that time. And Hindus almost toppled the Mughal rule. I think it was in 1712. And when then it was the Mughals even apologized. So the British realized that okay, you cannot mess with religion in India, and so they wanted to curb religious beliefs of Hindus and transform it something that would be well fitted with the British ideals. And that's how we got the movement surrounding the translation of Indian texts. and this whole idea that original Hinduism was non-dualistic worship of a formless divine, which if you see on surface is very close to Abrahamic traditions. It's on surface, because if you go dig deep, you realize that our conception of non-dualism is very different. So that's a different story. But on surface, it was something that they could digest. So, and that trend is still continuing in the academia, because we feel that, oh, when it comes to Vedas and Upanishads, that's a non-dual formless Brahman. That's who we used to worship. And then all this lesser people worshipped the theistic gods who did not understand the non-dualistic formations. So that was one thing that they did. Second, they reformed the judiciary. So at that time, it was Bombay High Court, which was then transformed. That was the Supreme Court, which was then transformed into Bombay High Court. And the job of the High Court, like in the stated fact, the job of the High Court was to curb the religious fanaticism that's rising, because that was the reason that the first war of independence happened. So they wanted to curb that and fight against the social evils, so as to how they put it, to fight the social evils coming out of this religious fanaticism. So they established Bombay High Court with that intention. And if you look at this, the very first case, this is amongst the very first case, like when High Court was formed, because when this case was when the Maharaj filed the libel case, it was still Supreme Court. And then it was trial. When it went to trial, it was the Bombay High Court in early January. So that's the timeline. So it was very recent from the first war of independence. The judiciary was formed with the agenda of fighting against these. And so when they got this case, it was like a perfect scapegoat that they got, because when they pass a judgment on this case. And if you look at a libel case is something very personal. It's one person filing a libel case, and the judgment should be on whether that person is right or wrong. So if what he's alleging is true or not. So it's a very personal thing. They could have either said that what Karsandas Mulje wrote about you is true, and so you're not awarded libel, or it's false, and so you should get compensation. Those are the two things that should come out of it. But if you look at how trial progressed, you can see why that the agendas with which they formed this High Court reflected in the judgments, because it was never about the Maharaj. As soon as the case started, it was never about the Maharaj. It was about the tradition first, that the tradition you're part of is sexually promiscuous, it's morally abhorrent, all of that. And then they twisted the principles of Vallabhacharya Sampradaya without understanding. There was not a single person in that trial who could stand up there and tell the judge what are the principles of Sampradaya, because many of the witnesses who were called were unable to speak the language. They did not understand the questions. They tried their best to answer and make a distinction between the guru and the god in their tradition, but they were not able to do that or convey their thoughts articulately, and the judge deliberately fined them for not speaking well. So all that happened, and when you look at the final judgment that the Judge Arnold gave, he said that this is a part of a very abhorrent, morally degenerate traditions of Krishna worship. So it went from a single person to the Sampradaya, to Krishna devotionalism, to Krishna himself. And you can see how this trajectory kind of reflects the agendas of the courts at that time.
Ma'am, extending the question on the merit of the trial itself, I want to discuss testimonies. Like, what were the victim testimonies that were seen by the judge at that point in time? Again, the kind of misleading understanding of the lack of articulation that led to the people who came to give the testimonies to be fined and penalized by the court. It's something that I think talks much about the merit of the case itself. So I would want you to get into that.
Sure. Actually, I want to read out the testimony because that's more like it would convey the thoughts very well. So there were 31 witnesses called by Mulji. They were all uninformed, and they were not well read enough to override his claims. Okay. And before we go into the testimony, I should tell you what was the problem. So, the point of discussion that they were having it here. The problem was there is an initiation ceremony in the Sampradaya, right? And which we call the Diksha ceremony. Most some traditional Sampradayas have a Diksha ceremony, right? So they have a Diksha, we have a Diksha ceremony, and the Diksha ceremony says that you will offer your Tan, Man, and Dhan, so which is your mind, body, and wealth, to Krishna, not to the guru, but to Krishna. And how the offering works is like it's like a spiritual marriage. As soon as you enter into the Diksha format, you promise that you will offer the food first to the God, and then you will have it. So you will only eat prasadam. That is the promise you're making. You will only eat prasadam. You will utilize, your house will be a mandir first and then your house. And every relationship, the worldly, the material relationship that you will share, will first be in conjunction of Krishna, like your spouses, your children. They're all devotees of Krishna first, and then your children. So that is the power of samarpan, like the self surrender that you're making. It's a very beautiful emotion. It's a spiritual marriage. So that is the diksha all about. So because your relationship with your soul, what we call Atma Sambandha, comes before Deha Sambandha. So with Krishna, you have Atma Sambandha, right? So they call it Brahma Sambandha because you're connecting with the Brahman, the supreme soul. So you're connecting your individual soul with the supreme soul, and all your relations are kind of designed in that fashion. So, and the guru performs this initiation ceremony, and you are connected with the deity, and then that deity comes into your home, and then he becomes a part of your family. So that is the design that Vallabhacharya came up with. And if you think about it, it was so radical for the time Vallabhacharya was, because at that time, not everyone was allowed to touch the deity. Right now, we do not understand what that significance is, because apart from a small secluded places, the caste system has dissolved, which is good. But at that time, it was very much unique and radical for his time. So he not only allowed everyone to touch the deity, he in fact brought the deities to people's home. So they don't have to wait in lines to just get a glimpse of the deity. The deity is now the part of their family. Like how Krishna was the part of Gopika's family, as we read in the Bhagavatam, that's how Krishna becomes the part of your family. So you cook for him, he eats first, and you eat his prasadam, and that's the fun. That was the idea of the Diksha ceremony. Now, the claim Mulji was making, he took this ceremony without any understanding of what it was. And he took the ceremony and he said that the devotees are surrendering their Tan Man Dhan to the Guru, not to the God, but to the Guru. In fact, Guru is only initiating the Diksha. They're surrendering it to God, but they took the Guru as the one they're surrendering it to. So, and that is leading to sexual promiscuities because they're surrendering their families and their wills and their bodies and their mind to the Guru. And that is what he did. He twisted the very foundational principles of Vallabhacharya Sampradaya. And when they did that, the 31 witnesses that he called did not, they knew that what he's saying is wrong, but they were not well read enough. And Karsandas Mulje is a Elphinstone educated man. He's a very highly educated man at that time, and not many people were allowed of that sort of education. So he's well spoken. He understands English. He is a journalist. So he knows how to articulate his thoughts. And many of the witnesses are actually unaware and uninformed, so they don't know how to respond to these claims, nor scripturally, nor legally. So what happens is they are unable to speak properly. And then what happens is that he never calls anyone who is a scholar of the tradition. Like if you are disputing the very foundational principles, you should probably call a scholar who can actually scripturally tell you that, look at the scripture, like I can quote you the scriptures, right? Because Vallabhacharya is saying that Krishna Seva Sada Karya, that you should perform Krishna Seva always. So I can quote you scriptures, but they couldn't. And so you have one example here. So you have Mr. Ansi here, the defense lawyer, who says, so they are calling, instead of Vaishnavas, they're calling Baniyas. And I find this very interesting, right? It might be true that many Banyas would follow this tradition, but in our tradition, inside the tradition, we always call Vaishnavas. We do not make a distinction that, oh, this is a Banya, this is a Kshatriya. We don't do that. Because once you're a Vaishnava, you're a Vaishnava. But they call it Banyas. And in the garb of demolishing caste hierarchies, they're actually perpetuated because they are calling by caste names. So they say, do Banyas believe Maharaj to be God? And the witness says, we consider him to be our guru. And then the Chief Justice says, tell the witness that if he does not answer the question, he will be sent to jail. But you see that he actually answered the question. He said he considered him to a guru. Then the witness says, what is the question? So the interpreter. So you see he's not directly aware. So interpreter is explaining. So the interpreter explains. And so witness says, some consider Maharaj a god in the shape of a guru. Now, as a follower of Indian tradition, not just Vallabhacharya Sampradaya, we know what that means. Guru Govinda do khade, kakela guppa. So in the shape of a guru, he is God. He's not God. So then the defense lawyer says, is Guru a God? And the witness says, no, Guru is Guru. So then Chief Justice tells him again, tell him if he does not answer the question, most indubitably he will go to jail. I don't think he understood most indubitably. So then the judge says that tell him he is asked what others believe, not as to his own beliefs. So he's asking what others believe. And the witness says, I don't know what others believe. I don't know if others believe him as God. I consider him simply a guru. And then the witness is fined for not giving a direct answer. So, and another witness, he says that I don't mean to say the same thing to worship the Maharaj just as he worships the image. The image is bathed and dressed, and the food is presented to it, but the same is not done to the Maharaj. Maharaj eats the food presented to the image and also distributes it amongst the Vaishnavas. So I don't think he could be clearer than this. This is the MLC, the Maharaj libel case, page 131. Right? So it is very evident that in the testimony, the witness is saying that the Guru is eating the prasadam and then distributing the prasadam amongst the Vaishnavas. They are overriding these claims and finding the witnesses for not giving a direct answer. And then they are presenting with the facts that actually Guru is equated with the God. So that is the level of distortion that happened in MLC. And I think if in the modern age you're making something, we can understand why this happened. The law was not on our side, the administration was not on our side. We understand all of that. But my point is, if you're making this today, your job is to present what British did to our sampradayas, how they twisted the principles of our sampradayas. But instead, you're actually presenting British as the reformers of the tradition, reformers of Dharma. And the people citing, I'm not blaming Karsandas Mulje here as well. It is quite possible that he was well-intentioned, and it is quite possible that he himself was unaware of the principles. But today we know better. We have better mediums of knowledge. We have better approachability. So you can approach scholars of the tradition. You can ask them, what is the truth of the case? How British used Karsandas Mulje, how they used the system against Indians. And if you show that, that's probably responsible filmmaking. Instead, you're perpetuating the same lies that the British did to demolish the Dharma, because that was the biggest biggest obstruction they had to lay their foundations in India. So that's my problem with it.
Ma'am, another question comes to the background of Karsandas Mulje, which sort of shapes the credibility that he must enjoy in this entire scheme of things. He was understood to be a reformist. He had a lot of missionaries and a lot of reformists who were supporting him, because I can't imagine him being able to land a lawyer that he did without the kind of support that he had. Because I think one of the things that is core to being a journalist is probably not having a lot of monetary support on your side. So, how exactly did he enjoy the support, and does that speak a lot to the credibility that he must enjoy?
I think you're absolutely on point there. I think what happened was his timing was accurate. Now, the British established the Elphinstone College with this motivation, actually, that they wanted to shape the young generation of India who would align their religious thinking with more Christian thoughts, Judeo-Christian thoughts, and that's what they did. And Karsandas Mulje was part of that system itself. And when he started writing in Satyartha Prakash, and when he started writing this op-eds in which he claimed about fighting against the evils of the tradition, missionary movements picked up on it. In fact, if you look at the judgment and how it was hailed by the missionary movements, the media and the missionary movements jumped at it. So, and they praised Mulji as the righteous reformer, the Luther of the age. Luther of the age. So, if you know that Martin Luther was known to be a Protestant reformer, right? And the Protestants are known to fight against. Now, they believe that Catholicism is idol worship because they worship the cross and they display the image of Jesus on cross. So the Protestants fought against that institution, and they believed in the sincerity of the devotee, and that's what Luther stood for. And they presented Karsandas Mulje as that person. And now they do not understand when they're doing this. They do not understand this fact that it works for Christianity because idol worship is a sin for you, but idol worship is not a sin in Hinduism. So when you say Luther of the age, it makes no sense to us because for us it's not a sin. So that's one thing. So you have the whole missionary movement hailing this process, and so when they say that this is something again very sinister, as you see, the film presents Karsandas Mulje as a man fighting against the system of oppression and system of evil. But if you look at the reality, whether Maharaj was right or wrong, let's bracket that. We do not have proofs for either thing, right? If I give him the benefit of the doubt, I would say that he was innocent and he was framed. You may think that he was not innocent. Whatever is the case, let's frame that truth for a moment. But you can see one thing very clearly, very evidently, that Maharaj was the one fighting against the system. Karsandas Mulje had the support of the British government. He had the support of the judiciary. He had the support of the missionary movement. He had the support of the administration of his college and the journalism, the whole. That time it's kind of ridiculous to call them left wing, but now we can very clearly say that it's the whole left wing thoughts that was coming up during that time. He has the support of all of that with his backing, and with that backing he was fighting this case. Maharaj was the one who only had his truth. He had nothing else except the truth he knew and the witnesses who were uninformed. That's all he had. And yet, with all that support, they were not able to prove that Maharaj was promiscuous. They did not have a single witness who would definitively state that Maharaj did something wrong. So that itself is the biggest clearly evident of what was going on at that time. And when you present that as the fact that, oh, Karsandas Mulje is the one fighting against the system, you're turning the tables around. And I think Vallabhacharya Sampradaya kind of became a scapegoat, but this was attack on many of the Bhakti traditions of the time, because he was attacking Krishna Bhakti traditions in general. So if you look at it today, in fact, it's sad because I feel that Bhakti traditions were the pillars of the society. If you think that India made any progress in caste system and all of that things, And if you think the British are to be were the reformers behind it, or the British educated Brahmo Samaj were the reformers, you're wrong. That's what the history teaches us. But the reformers were not able to penetrate to the Indian audience at large because they were speaking from a very high ivory tower, and they were asking to worship the god within, and nobody understood what they were talking about. It was only a very small group of elite people who were on board with the Brahmo Samaj and Arya Samaj's philosophies. If you think largely what eradicated caste system and to the general populace that Hindus of today are standing united in most places were the Bhakti Sampradayas. Not just Vallabha Sampradaya, but Ramanuja Sampradaya, the Madhva Sampradaya. They all came together and said, and if you look at the pillars of Bhakti Sampradaya, the Bhakti saints, they came from all sorts of backgrounds. And they were venerated as saints. The Arvas, even Kabir, the Ras Khan, and all of these people who came from varied backgrounds, varied religious backgrounds, caste backgrounds, across gender, like even women saints. How Meera stood against the tradition. She's the symbol of radicalism. How she stood against the tradition, and they are the people who taught that when you're doing bhakti, what matters is that you are a bhakta, you're a devotee. That's all that matters. It does not matter the caste and the hierarchy that you're coming from or part of. So that's what eradicated. So if they are going against, and I think the British were scared that if the Bhakti Sampradaya takes hold, and if that becomes the pillar of social equality in India, then it would be very hard to shake the unity of Hindus. And they were doing it with that agenda. I don't know how reformers were fooled into being a part of this by kind of alluding to the same tunes. But Karsandas Mulje had a massive, massive support because even the Samajas that he was part of were praising Karsandas Mulje. And in fact, Arya Samaj was formed later. But if you look at what the missionary movements say about the Arya Samaj, they say that it is an attempt to accept Abrahamic God without the offense of the cross. So that was the system. And I think today, I understand why reformers were not able to see it. It is very hard. I do not blame the reformers. I want that to be very clear. I don't really blame the reformers. I think they were doing their best and they were well intentioned. But retrospectively, like we have the hindsight today, and we can look back and see what was going on. And today is the time that we can reflect on it and say that, okay, this was a misleading attempt and reformers somehow became a part of it. It is our job to see how this caste system was eradicated. It is with the way of Bhakti Sampradaya. It is still, the Bhakti is the one that still actually unites Indians. No matter how hard you come from the legal and social standpoints of the reformers, even today, what unites Hindus is the bhakti and the love for their gods. So we have to remember that and stop dividing on the Hindus on the same lines as the British did. If you really want change, you should go back to the traditions.
Ma'am, this would be my last question with regard to the trial. I want you to clarify what exactly the judgment of the trial was and why was the verdict problematic?
So again, that's a significant question. So if you look at it, the verdict of the trial was Maharaj obviously lost. He won on the 3 points because they were not able to prove any sexual promiscuity, so he won on that points. But they still perpetuated the fact that the sampradaya itself is promiscuous. So I want to read this out. The MLC states that the sense of shame and public opinion are outraged by the doctrines of the sect. So the sense of shame kind of refers to the colonial notions of morality, and the public opinion was obviously limited to the opinions of the reformers. And then they say that. There's a very good article written by Dr. David Haberman, he's my advisor on it. And the defense claimed that the ancient religion of the Hindus contained in the Vedas is far different from the doctrine of the wretched, miserable, and pestilential sect of the Vallabhacharyas. That is the judgment. And Haberman points out that the judgment here is familiar. Indians used to be great, now they are lost. They need the benefits of the Western civilization and the guiding hand of the British to free them from the present bondage and allow them to return to their golden past. But they're not returning you to the golden past. They're returning you to the past that they feel is in line with their thinking. And the MLC further states that it is the carnal sensualism of strange transcendental lewdness. That was the judgment. So the final ruling praised Mulje as the righteous reformers, and it not only denounced Vallabha's devotional tradition, but Lord Krishna himself and all the sects associated with his devotional worship, which actually Judge Arnold saw that it is all the sects associated with Krishna devotionalism is strange and transcendental lewdness. Because Krishna himself is a lewd god. That was the judgment. So if you see that the final ruling was more of a theological judgment than a legal one. It was not a judgment on the libel suit. You have to remember while reading MLC that as you read this case, you have to remember this is a libel suit. This is a libel suit. This is against one person. But whenever it comes to judgment, it's always theological judgment. And then media and missionaries promoted it. And I want to read out one part in which in which Haberman says that during this trial, Hinduism itself was scrutinized. And based on Orientalist interpretations, temple worship was condemned in the favor of an ascetic worship of a formless absolute. In these instances, we witness the mutual corroboration of Western scholars of religion and the 19th century Hindu reformers. That corroboration is going on still today. That is what we need to dismantle as the post-colonial scholars of Hindu religion. That's what we need to dismantle, the Westernist understanding of religions.
Ma'am, I think that brings me to the most important question, which is the concept of formlessness. This has been something that has been thrown at our faces for since time immemorial, that this is a Murti Pujan community, and this is why they don't have the understanding of formlessness. But there's so many times that we've heard the word nirgun or nirakar. So what exactly is the concept of formlessness within the Sampradaya, which is an extension of the Sanatan Dharma?
So you have put this very rightly that the Sampradaya's conception of formlessness is what the Veda's conception of formlessness is. It's very similar. It might be slight Sampradayic variations. I would not get into that because I'm speaking from Vallabhacharya's point of view. But what we believe to be formless, so when they talk about formlessness, they are going quite literal, like without a form. So God cannot be depicted in any form. But when we talk about formlessness, we go that he cannot be depicted by any of the Panchamahatas. So when you call him by a name, you're giving him a form. So when you're assigning a direction to it, like God is in this direction, you're giving him a form because then he's represented by Akasha, the first of the Panchamahabhuta Tattvas. If you're calling him by name, he's represented by Shabda. He's represented by fire. He is represented by something. So when you talk about Nirakara, when Vedas talk about Nirakara, what they mean is he is beyond the Panchamahabhutas. Because we see that Brahman has two parts. He's Sadansh and he has Chidansh. Then he has Ananda. Satchidananda Brahman we talk about. You might have heard of this term. So Ananda, obviously, let's keep that aside for a moment. But the world is made out of two parts of Brahman, which is matter and consciousness. I'm putting it in very layman terms. So, and we say that Mula Prakriti refers to the matter. And the Purusha Tattva, the Atman, refers to the consciousness. Those are the two aspects which the world is made of, right? And that is why even the consciousness is present in every part of the world. That's how the trees know where to find the water, and they know how to grow in the direction of the sunlight. So that intelligence, that awareness is present in everything. And what we are trying to say when we say that Brahman is Nirakara, so Prakriti, because it's presented by the Pancha Mahabhutas, we are saying that the Brahman is beyond both Prakriti and Purush. It's something more than Prakriti and Purush. So we see the observable universe around us, and Brahman is something more than that. We are not saying that he's not Saguna Sakar. We are not saying that Brahman is not Prakriti, because if Brahman is not Prakriti, where does it come from? Right? That is the fundamental objections we have with Abrahamic conception of God. Because when they say God created the world, they're saying God is the efficient cause of the world, like how a potter designs a pot. But what is the raw material? The raw material is the earth that is using to design the earthen pot. And so God is not the raw material. God is not the material cause of the world. He's only the efficient cause of the world. And we are asking, where is the material coming from then? If God is not the material cause, where is it coming from? There cannot be any other source apart from God. If there is a source apart from God, then it is equal to God. So when we are talking about absolute monotheism, one God, what we are saying is there is one source of the world. It is both raw material, it is both the material, and it is the efficient cause. So God actually, the evolution happened and God created the world out of himself. That is what, if you look at the Bhagavatam, unfortunately, when we talk about Bhagavatam, people jump to the Dashmaskarta and people jump to the plays of Krishna. But there is the reason the plays of Krishna start at the 10th canto. There are 9 whole cantos before that you have to read to understand what Krishna is. He is not just a playful Gopa who is messing with the Gopikas. It is our fault also. This is the time to introspect. We have blamed the British enough, and I think that we have rightfully blamed the people who perpetuate British thinking on us. But it's also the time to self-reflect. Do we read our scriptures? There are 9 whole cantos, and what those cantos are talking about, if you look at the 3rd canto, the Bhagavata is talking about the creation, and it is so close to the scientific principle, because science says that the Big Bang happened, and we say the first product of Prakriti is sound. And then we are talking about the space-time dimensions, and you would be surprised to read, if you look the original shloka, the Bhagavatam is saying that the Kalagati Vikara, in the space, the Vikara happened with time. So we have space time there. So with Kalagati Vikara, what happened is sound was turned into Vayu. Vayu is turned into Jala. Jala is turned into, Vayu is turned into Tejas. And then Tejas is turned into Jala, and Jala is turned into Prithvi. So that's how Brahman creates the world. So when we talk about formlessness, that's what we are donating, that form is the Panchamahabhuta, or what you design out of Panchamahabhuta. So in the Vedic times, they focused on the fire, which was one of the element of Panchamahabhuta, because you cannot worship the Akasha is too subtle. Fire is again too subtle and you cannot contain it. So how do you focus on something when it's all pervading? And then they came up with the concept of fire. And so therefore in the Vedas, they call fire to be the mukha of Brahman. It's the mouth of the Brahman. Because whatever you put in the fire, it purifies it. If you put something in the water is contaminated. But if you put something in the fire, it purifies it. So that reflects the Atman, how the Jnana is kind of purifying everything. So that's it. That's why it reflected the Brahman. So that's how the yajnas came into being. So the concept of yajnas came into being. Later on, the same thing, because if you look at what Vedas are saying, they're saying that do the yajnas and eat the yajna bhaga. Don't eat, don't just cook the food for yourself. Eat the prashadam of yajna. So when you're doing the yajna, you're offering it to the Brahman, then you're offering it to the beings around you. So you have Manushya yajna, you have Pashu yajna, you have Bhuta yajna, you have Pitar yajna. So you're offering it to all the beings around you, and then you're eating. So it's training you to not just think for yourself, cook for yourself. Same concept, when the system kind of evolved further and the Vedic system collapsed, we have the puja format. And here, the form is represented by Prithvi because it's made out of the earth. So you're making a murti out of the earth. So it's represented by Prithvi. So now if you look at it, Prithvi is actually one element of the Panchamahabhuta that contains all the four elements because it is carry forward. Akasha does not have Jal, but Jal has Akasha, right? So that way the tattvas carry forward the previous elements. So the Prithvi is one element that carry forwards all the four elements. And so it is the complete representation of Pancha Mahabhutas. And so puja rituals evolve. It's similar to yajna process. So you have one image, you offer the food, you eat the prasada, and with the way of focusing your bhakti, you might have seen that many of the bhakti sampradayas are very focused on one particular deity. So if they are Rama Bhakti Sampradayas, they will not look at any other god. If they are Shakta Bhaktas, they will not look at any other god. It's not because we are discriminating among gods, but because how yoga talks about focus, that if you focus on one object of dhyana, one object of meditation, that's when you lead to samadhi. If your focus is on very different principles, then there is no way to go to samadhi. So we are combining those two principles of yajna and yoga in puja rituals, in bhakti rituals, not just puja, but bhakti rituals. So like when you do karma kanda, like in weddings, if you invite Ganesha, then that's just a puja ritual. You are not a bhakta of Ganesha. Everyone has to do Ganesh Thapana. But at home, if you're following a bhakti sampradaya, what you're doing is you're not doing form worship. What you're doing is that Panchamahabhuta, that supreme Brahman, who is more than the Panchamahabhutas, who is more than the Atman, is represented by that form. You are eating the prasadam like the yajna, and then you're focusing all your energy with tanman dhana to that deity, and that way you go from their deity to the moksha principles. So with this, like this dhyana dharan and samadhi, because all your energy is focused on one place. So that was the principle that we had. And no one talks about these, why we were, if you look at what Dayananda Saraswati said about Nirguna and Sakar in his pravachanas and in his words, he says that it's very similar to what British says that, oh, Indian people never move from deity to, they never move from Sakar to Nirakar. They are stuck with Sakar all their lives. The point is, we don't want to move, because the sakar is a glorious representation of that nirakara, and once that sakar once your bhakti is fruitioning, like it reaches its culmination, you see that the sakar, the Brahman begins interacting with the devotee through the murti format. That's how you have stories of the bhaktas, right? So you have that murti interacting with you, and then you become one with the nirakara. You don't have to move beyond. So they never understood where, when we talk about formlessness, it's a very, very refined concept of formlessness. It's not what Abrahamic says that, oh, it's just no image thing. That's not what we have here.
Ma'am, this brings me to something that you had pointed out in the previous answer, which is the role of the sampradayas. I think because of the effect of pop culture, we've understood that I think we all take everything with a grain of salt as long as a Baba is involved, because that Baba, that word is, it enjoys a certain derogation attached to it. So my question is that sampradayas, like you said, have always been against the system. They've always fought against the societal evils, whether it be the caste system, whether it be any forms of discrimination, or it be gender inequality. So could you set in stone again the role of sampradayas through history?
Um, I think if you look at right from Shankaracharya, right, he is responsible for uniting, bringing Hindus back in the front. And if you look at Shankaracharya, there's a very famous story, I think you might have known. Many Hindus have heard of that story, where he is confronted by a Chandala, who is seen to be Shiva in that form, who is kind of bringing him back to, jolting him back to reality, that why you are saying to me that go ahead, go away. How do I go away? What are you distancing yourself with? Are you distancing your body with your soul? Are you distancing your body with my body? Because then both are Maya. Then why are you distancing yourself? So in that story also you see that he's shattering the principles. Then you look at Ramanuja, where when he's having Diksha, then everyone is saying that, okay, this is the Maha Mantra. You cannot recite this mantra uh, before anyone. And what he does is like, if you do this, you're going to hell. And he says, if I go to Naraka, that's fine. But so many people will gain moksha. So it's a good bargain. So he climbs the top of the Gopuram and he gives the mantra away to everyone. And then he is closely associated with Arvas. So the Alvars and all these things. So they were all from all sorts of backgrounds. And it's very unlike, I cannot bring myself to say that they come from lower caste, because I think I can't even bring myself to say that. But to make people understand, that's the social strata they came from. But right now for us, they are great devotees, so we don't even think about them in that way. And so this bhakti movement spread with the Varkari Sampradaya in Maharashtra itself. You see, it's still going on strong. You see the story of Vithoba, where everyone is allowed into the temple, and that's what Vithoba stands for. And then you see Vallabha Sampradaya, where you have so many Muslim devotees. So many Muslim. We have Ali Khan Pathan, we have Ras Khan, we have Pir Jadi, we have even a prostitute that was brought into the Sampradaya. So it goes from high class Brahmins and Rajputs to the lowest part of the society. And we do not, right now when we read their stories, is kind of compiled in what we call Varta Sahitya, right? In the tradition, it is stories of various devotees who were disciples of Vallabhacharya and his son, Sri Vithalnatha. And in their stories, we never look at them, oh, this is a Rajput, this is a Brahmin. We always look at them as stories of devotees. That's how we look at. So I'm saying, what I'm trying to say here is, we can have this a full-fledged discussion of what caste system was, how it evolved, and what was our thinking, but that's a different story. When caste system took root in the society and it began, and the distortion happened, was something that even Buddha pointed out and the Buddhism scholar pointed out. We find that when the reform started happening, it did not happen because the British were not even the part of the scene. When I'm talking about Shankaracharya and Ramanujacharya, British were nowhere to be around. And even today, British think that they demolished the caste system, but I think the greatest role was played by the Bhakti Sampradayas. Not just in the sense of caste system, but also in the sense of demolishing other parts of the tradition, like how Meera represented. Uh, and they actually, because they were true to the tradition, they understood the distortions, and no one is closer to the tradition than these saints are. So they are the one who are responsible for demolishing these ideas. And even today, what I want to say this again, that even today, if you look at what brings us together, it's the Samohik Ganesha festival, it's the Durga Puja, whatever happens, those are the things that brings us together. And at that time, the caste system is demolished again. And so it's only through bhakti that India will truly be able to get rid of these things. It is not through Western education. It is not through Abrahamic ideas. It is through bhakti that we will kind of sail through these things. And for that, it's not enough to just get enraged when the films are made. It is not enough that you once a year you dance at Ganpati Visarjan. That's not enough. What Hindus need to do is read their scriptures. If whoever is listening to this or will listen to this, I have a request to make to them, that train your kids that once a week, choose a scripture of your liking, whatever sampradaya you belong to. Either it's Bhagavad Gita, it's something of Shakta tradition, Shaiva tradition, but don't watch films or see TV serials. Read your scriptures. You go to your elders, and if you have a temple that you go to regularly, ask the temple authorities. I also want to make this request to the temple authorities. If you run a temple, make this a part of your tradition, that once a week you're going to have a class on the scriptures and the Purana stories, so that people know that what our stories represented. It's not just this, because Sampradayas did not invent this radicalism. I'm not saying that one fine day those acharyas came and they said we will reform Hinduism is bad. Obviously not. That's how British thought. What Sampradayas did is like they used the tradition to bring out the equality, because they saw that when you turn, and because we have the stories of Jabala, don't we? We have the stories of Satyakam Jabala, that he is the one who said that I don't know who my father is, and he's like, if you are speaking the truth, you are a Brahmin. So we have these stories. And so acharyas used these stories and used the idea of bhakti to unite us. So I think we have to follow in their footsteps. We have to train our kids to go back to their scriptures, cultivate bhakti. That will bring about unity amongst us. It's not through anything else that we will be able to achieve this.
Ma'am, I just have two more questions with you. Um, Again, the reference of Krishna as a salacious god, that hasn't been just limited to the libel case. It has been something that we've heard again and again, like when the anti-Romeo squads were being launched in Uttar Pradesh. We had Prashant Bhushan say something very derogatory to Krishna as well. And at the same time, there's this concept of bridal mysticism, which I think is, in my opinion, incorrectly associated with the bhakti that Meera had. It wasn't really
Mhm.
bridal mysticism to say, because a lot of her poems talk about how she wanted to serve Krishna rather than
Yeah.
marry him, or the love being the kind that translates into spousal love. So I wanted to set the record straight on what Meera Bhakti can be
Sorry.
interpreted as, and at the same this, can you hear me now, ma'am?
Okay. Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I was just saying that I would like you to set the record straight on Meera Bhakti, because that is often, in my opinion, incorrectly associated with bridal mysticism. She, in many of her poems, talks about how she wants to serve God rather than it translating into a spousal relationship. And that again also sort of taking the present situation where we have the whole controversy of prasadam that came from Andhra Pradesh to the Ram
Mhm.
temple. Now,
Mhm.
if it was 1857 or 1712, like you would have said, it would have been cause for even the invaders to apologize. But clearly, we've become, of a thicker skin now. And do you think that is a sign of religious depletion?
Um, what I would say to that, I want to take Prashadam first. If I say something to that, it would be a little controversial, what I want to say, but if it's taken out of context. But I want to say that we have lost the Paurush. We have lost, because we are dismantling caste system. It's okay to dismantle caste system, but we have dismantled Kshatriyism and we have dismantled Brahmanism. That shouldn't be dismantled. What was the idea? Why we had Brahmins on the pedestal? Anyone can become a scholar. I'm not disputing that claim, but we need scholars and we need brave people to uphold the principles of Dharma. That is what is represented by Brahmanism and Kshatriyism. We have lost that. When we talk about Brahmanism, we talk about the negatives, how they were the evils of the society. But it is not wrong to say that India has been always made by Brahmins, right from the Chanakya to the Bajirao Ballad, the Maratha king. And because one who reads, and who would you rather want to be at the top? The people who are the money people, or the people who understand dharma and are ready to fight for it? Who would you rather see on the top? So when we see that we placed Brahmins on the top, that's the idea we placed it, and we need that back. We need people who understand dharma, and we need people to fight for it. We have lost that Paurush. That is why today we see, when this Prashada controversy happens, that is why we see that the faith of Hinduism is today so cheap that anyone can trample all over it, and we are quiet. We don't realize that we are standing here today because our ancestors have fought for dharma, and that is why we are able to celebrate dharma today, and that is the reason so many traditions are are able to stay together in India, because India is resting on Hinduism. We do our secularism, for you, we all know that secularism is the word that was added later on in the constitution. Our founding fathers did not add this word, and yet India was secular when the two nation theory happened. One was turned into an Islamic state and the other was secular. It was dharma nirapeksha. Why was it dharma nirapeksha? Secularism was not even added to the constitution at that time, yet it was secular. Why was it secular? Because we did not have a Western idea of secularism, we had an Indian idea of secularism. And that Indian idea of secularism comes from Hinduism, it comes from Sanatana Dharma. People wrongly say today that, oh, even atheism is okay in Sanatan Dharma. It is not okay. What we mean by that is we were not radical fanatics who used to kill atheists. That's what we mean when we say that, oh, that when someone was an atheist, we did not put him to death, we did not stone him. What we did instead was, okay, you have your opinion, we are not going to kill you for it. That is what Indian idea of Sanatan Dharma idea of tolerance was, and that is reflected when it's when it's kind of in how we tolerate other religions as well. That's what's reflected. That's what we mean by it. So that's where secularism came from. But that can only be protected if we protect our dharma. Once Sanatana Dharma is dismantled, everything, our rights, our sense of equality, our sense of unity, everything will be dismantled with Sanatana Dharma. India is standing on the grounds of Sanatana Dharma. And to protect it, we need to find our Paurush back. The masculinity is dead today. It's almost dead. It's a very sad state of affairs that we need that in people. And not just, I just don't say men when I say masculinity. I say, when I say masculinity, I say this urge to fight for dharma. That should be present in Hindus. I'm not saying go attack somewhere, but raise your voice. That's enough. We have seen that when we come together, we raise our voice and we revolt against something. Did, did we go and kill the Mughals? We did not. Yet they apologized. So we need to raise our voice and make people know that it is not enough. You cannot trample on our faiths. You have to respect the faith of Hinduism. And once we start doing that, I think everything will change. I'm glad this is happening, that we are able to discuss how Bollywood is distorting it. But so you will truly be able to fight against this when you are aware of your dharma. Just when something happens, you read on social media and you get all charged up, that will only lead to haphazard violence. I'm not promoting that. What I'm saying, when you prove to your dharma, you're following dharma, that's when your fight has the richness of dharma. Otherwise, it's just, you're just gullible. Whatever post you are going to read, you will hop onto that train. Don't do that, but follow dharma truly, and that's when you will be able to fight against it. So that's what I want to say about prashadam. Coming to your question about Krishna and Mirabai, I want to say this, that spiritual marriage is very different to carnal marriage. Okay, it's very different. So why I'm, because a spiritual marriage is atma sambandha, right? So it's not bodily relation. It's something that transcends your body. So it's atma sambandha. What is the most intimate part of your person, of your body? It's your atman, of you. What is the most intimate thing? It's atman. Nothing is more close to you than the atman, because it's the very sense of your being. That's why you say my body, because body is something that belongs to you, but atman is something that is you, right? And so you are, when you're talking about a spiritual marriage, what you're doing is you are associating your atman with paramatman. And if you do not have that sense of understanding that this is paramatman, then your spirituality is not culminated, it's not answered well. And I want to bring, I think I discussed this before as well, I want to say this again. When you look at Rasa Leela, this is exactly where you have Krishna calling the Gopikas, Some gopikas are able to enter the Maharasa. Some gopikas come out of their houses and they see the patriarchs of their family on their courtyard, and they're too embarrassed to step out in the night. So they go back. And then they are fired up by intense sense of separation, and then they give out their lives. So they become one with the Brahman. And Vallabhacharya in his commentary writes this, that those gopikas were not allowed into rasa by Krishna. This happened with Krishna's will. It did not happen because of the patriarchs were just the medium. It happened with Krishna's will. And Krishna did not allow them to enter into Maharasa because they had a sense of carnal understanding of Krishna. They were enamored by him. So they had not transcended that to see Krishna more than the beautiful boy that he was the Paramatman. Even and yet they were so true in their devotion and true in their love that Krishna kind of gave them moksha. Because when they gave out their life, Krishna merged them with him. So he gave them moksha. So that the grace of Krishna. But the gopikas who understood that he is the Paramatman, they were allowed to enter. And you see this when you read Gopika Geet. That's why I say that read your scriptures. There are a lot of things that will clear up first. When you read the scriptures, you find that the Gopikas are saying in the Gopika Geet, when Krishna is separated from them, right? He disappears and they are searching for Krishna, right? And people think that, oh, he's torturing them and this is how Hinduism is. But read what they're saying. They're saying Nakhalu Gopikanandan. Akhila Dehinam Antaratmadrika. Both Gopikas are saying that you are not just a son of a milkmaid. You're not Gopikanandana. Akhila Dehinam Antaratmadrik. You are the Antaryami that resides in everyone who has a body. Not just humans, animals, everyone who has a body. You are the Antaratma that resides in them. And you are coming here to fulfill the purpose of Dharma. So you don't just belong to us. How can we claim ownership on you? You just don't belong to us. You belong to everyone. And so when you will give us the prasadam of your grace, that's when we will be able to meet you. That is what Gopikas are saying. So they are the highest example of spiritual marriage. Right? When you think of Krishna and the Gopikas, that's the spiritual marriage, right? What Meera represents. So Meera understood this. All our saints understood this. So when we are talking about kind of the spiritual marriage, this is what we're reflecting to, that it's a marriage because it's a conjugation, and it's a conjugation of Atman with Paramatman. If you have this sense of and whatever bhava you approach Krishna with, right? You approach him with vatsalya bhava. You can approach him with motherly love. You can approach him with whatever rasa you find in your heart. You can approach him with that emotion, but you have to have this awareness. Because I want to give this. Vallabhacharya defines bhakti. It's actually coming from Narada Bhakti Sutra. Okay, so Vallabhacharya is taking Narada Bhakti Sutra's definition of bhakti, and Vallabhacharya is saying that bhakti is Mahatmi Jnana Purvakam Sudrid Sarvatodika Sneha. So Sudrid is something that is unwavering. Sarvato Adhik is more than everything else. And Sneha. So your love that is more than everything else, and it is unwavering, it's unconditional. It should not move. That once you have fallen upon bad times, your love is soured. That's not bhakti. And that love could be anything. It could be motherly love, it could be any kind of love, brotherly love, friendship, anything with God. But what is before Sudhir Sarvatodik Sneh? It is Mahatmya Jnana. So it is the awareness of his cosmic form. So your love should be preceded by the awareness of his cosmic form. You can worship him as your child, but you have to remember that he's not just your child. He is the Paramatman. If it is preceded by that, then that is love. If it is just love, like Yashoda only had love. Because if she had the awareness of his cosmic form, she would not be able to be a mother to Krishna. So Yashoda is a model for Vatsalya love, but she is not the model for bhakti. Devaki is the model for bhakti, because as soon as she birthed him, she saw him in the Narayana Swarupa. And then Krishna said that, okay, I am Narayan, but I'm still your child. Follow that balance. And she was able to do that. So we see her in Vallabha Sampradaya, we see her as the model of bhakti. We see Gopikas as the model of bhakti, because even though they had this relation with Krishna, they still had the Mahatmya. And that's why Vallabhacharya or Narada Bhakti Sutra defines bhakti as that. So whenever we talk about bhakti, we have to remember this principle, that whatever emotions on surface, they are approaching God with particular emotion, right? Arjuna approached him with friendship emotions. Whatever emotion you're approaching God with, that is fine. It should be preceded by the awareness that He is Paramatman, your Atman, and that awareness kind of transcends all the carnal and promiscuous motivations.
Thank you very much, ma'am. It is always a pleasure to engage in a conversation with you. It's just always a shower of jnana. And this, I believe, will only mark the beginning of the many talks that we will have with you. Thank you again. Namaste.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure speaking with you, as always. Namaskar.